This is Ty Walrod, and I'm an out boss.
Hello, Out Bosses. This is Rhodes Perry, your host of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where we get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. So on today's show, I'd like for my guest to introduce himself.
Hey, thanks, Rhodes. This is Ty Walrod. I'm the CEO at Bright Funds, and I'm an out boss.
Awesome. Ty, really excited to have you on the show today. And for our guests who might not be familiar with who you are, a quick bio here. So Ty, as he just said, is the CEO and co-founder of Bright Funds. And that's an organization that helps leading businesses like Google, Apple, and Microsoft power their charitable giving. Ty also serves on the boards of Sustainable Silicon Valley and startup Tech Mixer. And he's an active member of Silicon Valley Leadership Group and Founders Network. Ty, you definitely are a mover and shaker when it comes to blending business with social responsibility. And we're really, really lucky to have you on the show. So to kick off the interview, can you tell us a little bit more about Bright Funds and what makes it unique?
Sure thing. And just for the record, because I'm sure there are lots of listeners, we're actually not running the programs at Google, Apple, and Microsoft. But we are running programs at Cisco Systems, VMware, Dropbox, Box, and about 50 awesome companies.
Awesome.
And basically what we do is we partner up with companies that really want to invest in their culture and their employees. And specifically, we run the employee giving and volunteerism programs at these companies. Each and every person basically gets a Bright Funds account, and they can think about how they want to make a positive impact in the world, build a personal giving and volunteering strategy, and then we help them make a positive impact through giving, matching, and finding opportunities to spend their time in an impactful way.
Thank you so much for that clarification, Ty. And so you're working with individuals in these businesses. Are you also working with the business itself and how it's doing its corporate social responsibility? Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Is that part of what Bright Funds does?
That's a great question, Rhodes. We sure do. So we really have sort of two customers packed into one. First, we do partner with companies. We help them think about their corporate social responsibility strategy, and we really try to really be a thought partner and almost like a consultant to them on how they can run impactful programs. We also have each and every person at the companies we work with has a personal account with Bright Funds. So it's the employees at these companies that jump in and they can contribute to the causes that they're most passionate about. In most cases, their company matches their contributions dollar for dollar. We help them respond to disasters. We help people with volunteering and giving all over the globe. So really, like, we both work with companies and their employees to help them do good in the world.
And thank you for clarifying that. And so I'm thinking about some of the other businesses that do similar work and curious, what sets Bright Funds apart from those other businesses kind of in the same space as you?
You know, before Bright Funds sort of entered the workplace giving and volunteerism space, we looked at what was there, and we felt like really every technology company on the space before us was very transactional. It's almost like everybody before us felt like compliance-oriented transaction processing, and the result was not very many people adopt and use the programs on an average basis. And so what we thought we could do at Bright Funds is focus first on the individuals within the company, each and every employee, and really help bring programs to life by building a great product, great user experience that focuses on impact, helping people understand their impact, and help people give more strategically. So we introduced this concept called funds, and we have other things that we've introduced into the product that help people think more holistically about their giving rather than just say, hey, I donated $50 because my friend asked me to, and I'm going to get a match. We do actually kind of the opposite. We say, hey, Rhodes, what are you passionate about? Do you really care about ending poverty? Do you care about climate change? We're going to ask you, do you have a target amount that you'd like to invest philanthropically over the course of the year? Is that $2,000? Okay, great. And then we help you work toward your personal goal. So we really flip the model on its head. And the result that differentiates us is we have really high participation at the companies we're working with.
A lot of really great takeaways of what you just shared. And I think this is important for other entrepreneurs, regardless of what space they're in, is just kind of taking a look at how, kind of these traditional business practices are done. Like you said, this kind of older model doesn't really do the engagement that you all do. And I think that kind of disruption, as you said, it is setting you apart. And I think that's really, really valuable. And it sounds like, the kind of higher touch that you're doing with individuals to help them think really strategically about their giving it sounds unique. I've definitely worked in larger businesses before where, it seems like every November we're starting to think about charitable giving and tax write-offs. And from my perspective, and this was like 10, 20 years ago, it felt a little stale or just kind of a little rushed. So I like how you're describing how you're working with individuals to really think around how they want to make a difference and how they want to, put a dent in the universe, so to speak.
That hits it, Rose. We have this philosophy that a 25-year-old sales guy at Dropbox should be able to give with the same quality of impact as Melinda Gates.
Yeah.
And if we can bring that to hundreds of thousands and millions of people ultimately through a great product that's scalable, then we're really helping a lot of individual people who wouldn't otherwise have access to such high quality information really move the needle on the cause areas that they're most passionate about. It's really exciting to work on.
Yeah. And I was noticing on your website, there was, it looks like you do a lot of interesting reports. And I'm curious, is that something that you give back to individuals, say someone who is working at Salesforce or one of your clients, right? And that might not be one of your clients. So I'm sorry if that's not, but they should be working with you if they're not. Right?
We love the folks over at Salesforce.
Yeah.
But they're not a client.
Okay. Yet. But so, I'm just curious, for those individuals, do they get to see their impact? If, say, I'm focused on ending poverty for LGBT young people or something like that, do I get to see the other people that are contributing, different amounts and, what our overall impact is?
That's the short answer is yes. So both from a company-wide level and from an individual cause level. So if you support an individual nonprofit on Bright Funds, you're going to get updates from the nonprofit's individual social media channels. If you support one of our funds, like focused on LGBT equality or focused on global poverty, you're going to receive reporting back from those funds on the kind of impact that you're helping make possible.
Nice.
And then on top of that, and you can also see which colleagues are donating or volunteering. We don't share the amounts because we don't want people to be intimidated. But if you choose to share that you contributed to a specific area, other people in your company can see your picture and that you're behind that same cause. And it really starts to build this sense of community and sort of rallying the troops behind different cause areas.
I love that. I think that, based on my experience with charitable giving, I give through a company, my company matches me, and I get maybe an annual report to that organization that I'm focused on. But I love kind of seeing the bigger picture and what you're doing. So thank you for doing that. Bright Funds seems like it's doing a ton of different things, based on what I've researched online. I'm curious right now, what has you most inspired about working with Bright Funds? Where do you see it going? Kind of putting your entrepreneurial hat on, what does the next 5 or 10 years hold for you?
Sure. That's such a great question. The reality is there's so much more good that each person can be doing. We already have people using Bright Funds for all kinds of things, getting involved in new ways that they maybe never thought they could have an impact. And yet there are more people who aren't yet doing anything who we need to reach, and people who we're already engaging with, we can engage better. So there's a lot of opportunity on that front. And right now we have roughly 50 enterprise partners using Bright Funds. And, my goal in the next few years is to grow that number from 50 to 500 to 5,000 and really expand the opportunity for people to make a positive impact in the world.
Yeah, I love that. And I like your numbers there. So you have 50 right now. And I think, again, taking a step back for other entrepreneurs listening, you already you're serving clients right now and you're dreaming of where to take that to the next level. And it's almost kind of like the snowball effect, right? Where it's like, okay, we've got 50 and here, in 10 years, we're going to have 5,000 or 500,000, right? So
that's good. I mean, we like to think of it, Rhodes, as like, I like to think of Bright Funds as my one home for social good. Mm-hmm. So we think of Google for searching and YouTube for videos. And our goal is people think of Bright Funds for doing good in the world. We're building on that ethos. We're reaching people through their companies. But we also have several thousand individuals who just have a Bright Funds account, and this is how they contribute to the causes they're passionate about.
Yeah, and that makes me think, as someone who runs a very lean operation, so for solopreneurs or smaller businesses, are you thinking about how to engage those folks, or are you already engaging with small business owners right now?
We do have a number of small and medium-sized businesses. We don't really, honestly, we don't discriminate because we think more companies and their teams doing good is a good thing. As far as being a startup and remaining focused, which is always a challenge when you're building a company, we specifically target companies that have more than 500 employees. But we've got a lot of smaller companies that come to us and say, hey, we're 100 people. We'd love to do this. Can you help us out? And of course, we partner with those companies too.
And that's great. That speaks to your brand and your reputation, where people are actively seeking you out rather than, kind of the reverse, where you're really going after additional people. So congratulations on that. I want to focus on, your motivations for starting Bright Funds. And I know for our guests who are tuning in, you were one of the co-founders of OutServe, which is a global nonprofit that advocates on behalf of LGBT service members, which is great. So it's clear that you're very passion focused and you're trying to align your passions with your work. Was that the motivation for starting Bright Funds, or were you working for someone else, and did you feel like you were working in a culture that didn't quite get who you were, and you were like, okay, I'm ready to kind of take all of my knowledge and start out on my own? Kind of which side of the coin did you land on when you were thinking about starting Bright Funds?
No, that's a great question. I mean, I grew up in Kansas, but started my career in San Francisco. And I started my career at Deloitte and was part of the LGBT employee resource group. I didn't even know what an employee resource group was when I started my career. And I feel very fortunate to have landed in such an inclusive work environment as Deloitte. And then I moved to a high growth technology company that was also an inclusive environment, where I worked for the chief financial officer. But I think what really inspired Bright Funds and what helped me feel empowered was the experience in co-founding OutServe. And basically, my friend and I co-founded an organization that brought together thousands of active duty LGBT service members. And we helped play a material role in telling their stories. And ultimately, we played a material role in bringing an end to Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And for me, the fact that OutServe grew so quickly into an organization that had, I think more than 2 million supporters in the public, it just grew really quickly in scope of influence and how we were able to have a positive impact on the world. It left me feeling very empowered. And as I thought about what was next, I knew I wanted to leverage technology that was scalable, and I wanted to work in a space where we could do that and have a positive impact in the world. I also, Rhodes, knew that it's possible and very common now to start a for-profit, for-good company. And that's what Bright Funds is. We're a Delaware C Corp for-profit company, but we're doing good in the world by the nature of the space that we're in.
Yeah, I think that the blend of kind of business with social responsibility and the fact that you can have a social enterprise that isn't a nonprofit, at least in kind of the world that I'm in, I'm seeing much more of that. And I think that your business in particular is a great example of that. You mentioned that you worked at Deloitte as one of kind of your first jobs, and you joined the LGBT employee resource group, which is awesome. I'm curious, in working as the CEO of Bright Funds, what's one thing that you do to create a more inclusive workplace culture? And the reason why I ask is that I often work with a lot of clients who struggle with, okay, we know that we need to do better. We need to create a culture of belonging for some of our most underrepresented employees, and we have no idea how. So if you could be really concrete with some of the things that you do in your own business, I would love to share that with some of the clients that I work with.
Sure. I mean, I think it starts with looking inward and assuming that we don't have all the answers and we probably could be doing some things better. So as a team, we're constantly challenging ourselves to buck the status quo, so to speak. Just to give you an example that's concrete, one of the things that we did is, we went through a phase of more rapid hiring than we had done at any point before. And we sort of paused and said, is there anything we can learn from this process? And we realized that we all could use training on unconscious bias. So that's actually something we took a pause as a company, and we had roundtable discussions and an all-hands presentation about the different kinds of unconscious bias that we might not even know that we're putting into place. And that helped us, not only be a more effective team and a more inclusive team, but it also helps us to make sure that we have diversity in hiring, that we aren't being blinded by lenses that we don't even know we're wearing. And so that's just one of probably many examples.
I think that's a great example for any startup. I know that there's the rush to get the right people in as quickly as possible to do the thing that you want to do really well. And the fact that you took that time to say, hey, we're aware that, we're all wired in some ways to have, these blind spots or unconscious biases. So let's kind of stop here and reflect and figure out where they might show up to try to create a more objective hiring process, right? Like, I think that's great. I'm curious, do you have kind of a diversity and inclusion strategic plan or something that you've put on paper to just make sure that your values are kind of being lived out in a more concrete way? Well,
it's something we talk about a lot, but we haven't put it on paper. And, more and more as a startup, it seems like, every week we find something that we need to create the process and document how we did this so we don't have to reinvent it. And, diversity inclusion is something that we have I would say on the surface, we have a very diverse team. We have people who grew up and from different countries and have passports from different places. We have a very high percentage of women in our company compared to many tech companies. Yet, I would love to know quantitatively exactly how we stand up. And I would actually love, once we measure that, to know, do we want to set goals around this as we grow? And in order to do that, you've got to document it. You've got to set those goals. So I think for us, as we, move from this chapter into the next chapter as a company, that's something that we really do want to put into place and internalize.
Yeah, I think that's super smart. And I'm so happy to hear that you're committed to measuring all of your diversity and inclusion metrics. When we all know that we can't manage what we don't measure, and the fact that you're forward thinking and trying to do that is huge. And I wish more people were on the same page as that to understand the importance of why. And it's clear that you get that. So I'd like to shift a little bit and talk more about your LGBT identity, what brings you to the Rainbow family, and how that shows up in your work every day. And I'd like to start specifically with kind of you reflecting on a time where it was potentially difficult to be out in your job. And I know that you just kind of talking about working at Deloitte, it was a super inclusive environment, but knowing that about 75% of workers in the United States cover some aspect of who they are in order to fit in the workplace, can you think about a time as it relates to being a part of the Rainbow family where you did cover because you were afraid that you wouldn't get that kind of stretch opportunity or promotion, or you had concern around your job security, or even as you're running your own business right now, potentially losing out on a client or revenue because you're afraid, or you might be fearful that other people might not be as welcoming of LGBTQ folks?
Yeah, I mean, the best possible example is with my experience as the CEO of Bright Funds. I take a lot of sales meetings for our company, and we're constantly meeting leaders from great companies all over the country. Usually companies they're really happy to know the CEO is coming to this first introductory meeting with Bright Funds. And often a part of introducing Bright Funds is my story of co-founding the organization Outserve before Bright Funds that helped have a large-scale positive societal impact, basically promoting LGBT equality and helping to end Don't Ask, Don't Tell. That's part of my story. That was part of why I wanted to start Bright Funds. And I found that I was in a recent sales meeting with a company that I perceived to be more conservative, and I didn't show up my full authentic self. I didn't tell that story, and it just didn't go well. I found that I need to be able to tell my story. When companies work for us, they want to know that I'm bringing my full self to the relationship between Bright Funds and that company if one is going to turn into an actual business partnership. So I owe it to them to be authentic, and that was a major learning for me. I need to show up my full self in every opportunity. Now, do I have to tell my full story in every sales meeting, or do I? Not necessarily, but I've learned that it actually had the opposite effect. If I cut myself short, I feel like the relationship doesn't get the strong foothold that it needs. So that's just one example.
That's a really great example, and I just want to kind of dig a little bit more into it. You had said that your perception of the company was a little more conservative. So what were some of the signals where you're like, I don't know if this leadership team could handle learning about Outservice or Outserve and all of the great advocacy that I did for LGBT service members? Was there a particular thing, or did you just have a feeling? What was that like?
A lot of our first partners for Bright Funds were Silicon Valley tech companies I'm mindful that we live in a very inclusive geography. And, recently Bright Funds has been selling to more and more companies all over the country. And this particular company is a manufacturing company with headquarters, probably 1,000 miles from San Francisco. And I actually had a presumption, an incorrect presumption myself, that this company would be sort of, conservative enough that they just wouldn't want my founder story, the story of me. And I was just wrong. So fortunately, I was able to reconcile that, but I just kind of learned not to cut myself short and not sell myself short.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, really, your takeaway is that being authentic in your origin story, and by doing that helps build trust. It's also really scary, right? Because you have to be vulnerable, or it's I'm not sure how this is going to land. And yet this was a learning moment for you around there was something where we didn't connect, and perhaps it was because I was holding back around who I am, right? And so thank you for sharing that, because I know that this is a struggle for some other folks who are LGBT business owners around, getting all of our dream clients and, making sure that we can still be ourselves and feed ourselves and all of that good stuff. So
you bet. And there's kind of a bonus built into that, Rhodes. It's the first is equality is continuing to persist across the country. So most people, and more, and it's not, I shouldn't say it's most, more and more companies realize the importance of genuinely supporting equality in the workforce. So one, people therefore should feel more and more comfortable being out at work if they want to be. And the second thing is, if I ever shared my story and found that I offended someone, that's probably not the kind of company that we want to be working with. Right. We want to be working with companies that really push inclusion forward. And, every one of our partners is just awesome and an amazing company to work with. And, I think if I haven't run into that problem, but I think if someone actually did have a problem with my founder story, they would, probably not be the best customer of my company. Exactly.
And you hit the nail on the head is, the more authentic that you can be, you're going to attract those dream clients to work with you, and definitely kind of filter out those folks that just aren't going to appreciate all that you bring to the table. And I also want to congratulate you on just being out, as a business leader, and recognizing, still in 28 states, it's really difficult to be 100% authentic. And especially if you're working for someone else, just given the lack of employment protections for LGBTQ folks. So we still have a lot of work to do. So I think it's, having possibility models like yourself around building a thriving business and being yourself, being out is huge. And I think that there's still a lot of people that are looking to folks like you and myself, where it's wow, these people are doing it. they're working with clients that are allies and they want to work with Rhodes or Ty, and I think that's really, really great to share. Okay, so we shared some of the hard stuff. The show is definitely about empowerment. And I'm curious from your perspective, thinking about all of your lived experiences of being a part of the Rainbow family, what are some of those unique things? Maybe it's just kind of coming out again and again to people where you really, your origin story around who you are and certainly around your business. What are some of those lived experiences of being LGBT that allow you to kind of have these superpowers in business? Can you think of, a particular experience or example where it's like you're more resilient because of this? So when you do hit those bumps, as every entrepreneur or business owner does, it's like, what, I've been through much harder things. And I always say on the show is like, I think about my own gender transition. And it's like, what, in terms of entrepreneurship, I've got this. Like if I can transition, in my life, all this other stuff makes it easy. So is there something that you can think of with your own experiences that pop up that might inspire some other folks?
Yeah, I mean, I really think of kind of three things. And I think this comes just from living my life, not necessarily because I'm a gay man, but just as a part of being a human. I think the first thing is I try every day to bring my authentic self to my work and to my family. And am I perfect at it? No. Do I fall down sometimes? Yes. But I try to show up and be authentically me every day. The second thing is I've learned that people are generally good. Even people who it might feel like they're against a group of people. If you get to know them one-on-one, people are generally good. And so I think it's on us, especially as part of the LGBT community, to build relationships with those who are not part of the LGBT community and help them get to know you. That's the second thing. And I think the third thing that comes to mind is, and this probably goes through, some of the hardships of coming out, and I've been very fortunate, but for me, I derive energy from standing up for my beliefs. So I get energized when, I'm not combative, but I really get energy from standing up for what I believe in. And those are just kind of three things that come to mind. Be authentic, believe that people are generally good and genuinely will get to know you if you take the time to share yourself with them, and, take energy from the challenges you go through and turn that into doing good in the world.
Yeah, I think you kind of answered my next question, which is about, considering those challenges and the strengths that we bring. What do we want those folks, whether entrepreneurs or folks thinking about jumping into being a small business owner, what do we want those folks in particular to walk away with to be more authentic in their work? And kind of what you said is, just showing up is like 90% of success, right? And you're showing up in a really authentic way and building one-on-one relationships with people to get to know who you are and your family. That's really, really huge. And just being passionate about advocating for what you feel is right. Are there other things that you would think, if someone was kind of calling you today, say, hey, Ty, I'm thinking about starting my own business. I'm really struggling with, how out I can be in my business. What would you say to them?
I would say be comfortable in your own shoes and just be yourself. Mm-hmm. Be comfortable being as out as you're comfortable being.
Right.
And I think if you're true to yourself, like I don't show up. I just show up to work every day as me. And if you do that, if you feel grounded in who you are, like you're going to show up the right way. It's going to naturally happen.
So this is an interesting question, and this is our last question before we go to a quick sponsorship break. And it's interesting because your business is all about charitable giving. So I usually ask my guests, what's one way that their businesses give back to LGBT communities? And so I know you're in the business of helping a lot of people from a lot of different communities, but is there something that comes to mind? Maybe just kind of Bright Funds being in the Bay Area. Are you involved with supporting some of the nonprofits in the area, through mentorship programs, trying to support some LGBT folks? Is there anything specific that comes to mind there?
We are. Well, yeah, I mean, to your point, people contribute, people outside it. We facilitate people contributing and volunteering to LGBT organizations and communities all the time because of the companies that we're serving. But internally, we have team members who volunteer to support at-risk youth. We try to create opportunities for our own giving back, and we also match our own employees' contributions to charitable organizations. And a lot of my team members are personally supportive of the LGBTQ community, and we create space for them to give back. So we kind of proactively organize some of it, and in some cases it just organically happens because that's what our team members are passionate about.
Right. And thank you for sharing that. So I want to take a quick break right now. Aspiring out bosses, are you struggling with taking that first entrepreneurial leap? Does the imposter syndrome prevent you from getting started? Have you considered seeking support, but you're just not sure where to turn? Look no further. The Out Entrepreneur now offers a coaching and mentorship program where you can access support and strategies to shift your mindset from employee to entrepreneur. If you're looking for accountability and a mentor who successfully busted out of the 9-to-5 lifestyle, let's schedule a time to talk today. Visit www.outentrepreneur.com and look for show notes from today's episode to schedule a call. Again, the URL is www.outentrepreneur.com. Together, let's welcome you to the wonderful world of being an out boss. We are now going to jump into our bonus round, which is, I think, a fun part of the show, to get to know Ty a little bit better and to learn a little bit more about Bright Funds. So Ty, are you ready for some quick fire questions?
Sounds fun. Let's do it.
Okay. All right. So here we go. All right. So let me just pull up those questions now. Okay. So in one sentence for you, what does it mean to bring your whole self to work?
I would say aim each day to be fully present and fully self-expressed.
Nice. Very, very simple and to the point. Do you have a mantra or a quote that you reference that helps you stay motivated in your business, especially when things get hard?
I do, and I'm not going to be the only person on earth who has this, but mine is be the change you wish to see in the world.
I love it.
I have had that. I had that quote on my wall when I was like 14, probably. And that really has stuck with me. Like, if you believe you can be the change that you wish to see in the world and actually start working on it, it's possible. Yeah. That's kind of what we're trying to do with Bright Funds.
Yeah. And I think it's a good mantra to reference, especially when it might be difficult for you. I mean, just by supporting so many nonprofits and other organizations through Bright Funds, you're definitely you're being that change. So thank you. Okay. So can you share one personal habit that helps you master yourself in your business?
Yes. Daily meditation and exercise. Mm-hmm. I think if I had to say one, I'd say meditation, but it's really both for me.
So tell me a little bit more about that. I know this is the quick fire round, but a lot of people say that they meditate on the show. And so what does that look like for you? How do you make sure that that's a part of your everyday habits?
Well, I have a bet going with my friend Max, and we've had it going for 2 years now, 2 years as of this month, where every day we both meditate. And if we miss a day, we have to Venmo the other guy $10. So I've got $10 on the line every day. Whoa. And I use an app called Headspace that really makes it easy. I find a quiet space. I sit down. I push the play button. And for 10 minutes, I'm guided through an exercise on creativity or focus or stress relief. And it's really an opportunity. It's sort of like exercise for the mind. It's great.
I love that. It's one thing to have an accountability buddy to kind of say, I'm going to do this, let's text each other every day. It's a whole other thing when you've got skin in the game with $10 on the line every day. I'm sure that adds up. So
yeah, I call it contributing to the Max Retirement Fund. Nice. And I try not to do it very often.
Nice. I love that. Also, you said Headspace is a good app. There's also Insight Timer if people are looking to do a little more self-reflection and meditation. So I sometimes ask this question, and you feel free to pass if you'd like to, but I'm curious for you, and again, this is the bonus round, so try to keep it brief, but this might be a little bit longer. Do you believe that our current presidential administration is good for LGBTQ businesses or does harm?
Wow. I won't take the easy route and pass. I will say this. This administration could be a lot more helpful for the LGBTQ community, and that's no surprise to anyone, at least anyone who's paying attention. The flip side of that is this administration has brought a lot of people together to realize they've got to stand up for what they believe in. We've seen since this new administration, as an organization that facilitates contributions to a multitude of cause areas, we've seen a huge increase in people getting active in their communities, people volunteering, people contributing where they want to make a difference. So I think that, it's caused people to come together, which has been an unexpected positive that's come from this administration.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. I definitely agree that I think that this administration is galvanizing a lot of folks, especially beyond LGBT communities, which is great. But it's interesting what you raised around the work that you do at Bright Funds, in that you're seeing, I'm guessing, like an increase compared to maybe before November of 2016 around contributions to nonprofits. Is that true? Are you seeing kind of like a greater number of people stepping forward to give support to nonprofits?
We are, and we absolutely are. The reality is people feel galvanized to, and it's not just LGBTQ issues. People who care about the environment are jumping in and supporting environmental causes with their own funds. People who care about civil liberties are jumping in and supporting the ACLU Foundation and Southern Poverty Law Center. So there are, in many ways, people have had to look inward and say, I'm now responsible for standing up for what I believe in. And that's really, anytime that happens, it's good that it catalyzes positive change. We saw, to answer your question, we saw in the short period, we did a short study before and after the election, and we saw 1,000%, I think it was 1,000% uptick in cause area contributions, meaning non-religious contributions on our platform in an equivalent time. I think it was 10 days after the election versus the 10 days preceding. It was a pretty significant uptick. And of course, since then, that trend, maybe it's not 1,000% increase, but that trend has continued.
Yeah. So just to underscore that, 1,000% uptick 10 days after the election. So it's interesting seeing different people coming forward and, rallying around causes that are really important to them. And I think it goes back to your point around strengths, and just kind of speaking around what you're passionate about and advocating for the things that you want to see be better to create a better world, right? So a couple more questions for you. This one is not biased, so you don't have to say anything about this podcast, but I'm curious, can you share a book or a podcast that has contributed to your success as an outboss?
I think, there's so many things that influence you or that have influenced me, and I presume all people in a leadership position. One book that I really like is a book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And it's actually quite a sobering read when it comes to thinking about being an entrepreneur. But it's also a major inspiration that a lot of people have come before me and figured it out. So that's a very motivating book. So that's probably what I'd reference.
The Hard Thing About Hard Things. So I will definitely look that up. I know that folks know that I'm located in Portland, Oregon. So I probably am going to walk over to Pals and check that out. So
by Ben Horowitz.
Ben Horowitz. All right. And we'll include that in the show notes as well. I like what you said there, where a lot of people have already figured this out. They've kind of gone down this road before as entrepreneurs. And, we're certainly not the first ones. So when we kind of hit those challenges that pop up inevitably almost every day, it's all about being creative and resourceful. And I think that that's just a really good reminder. So thank you for sharing that resource. Okay, so Ty, before I close out with these kind of last two questions, I want to turn the microphone around and see if you have any questions for me or any questions about the show that are not clear. I'm happy to answer those now for you.
Well, I would love to know where you'd like to take the show. What's success look like for you over time?
Oh, I love that. That's a really good question. Well, right now I'm really focused on live podcast events. So thank you for asking that, because by the time that this show airs, I will have hosted a very successful live podcast event in Orlando, Florida. And it's really just getting the show known amongst other LGBT businesses, not just in the United States, but hopefully globally, and working really, really closely with the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce, which has been incredibly supportive of this program. Episode 13, we had Jonathan Lovitz, who's their vice president of communications, on the show. And he's wonderful. And he had a lot of really great advice for business owners like ourselves around, why the NGLCC exists and how the NGLCC can really help support and grow our businesses. And I know that you're in the Bay Area. Start Out is also an incredibly wonderful resource, virtually for right now to connect us all. And so I'm hoping, in 2018 that, looking towards the latter part of this year, to do a live event out in the Bay Area and just kind of teaming up with those folks as well. So when I come there, I would love to meet you in person, and I think that would be great to connect. So the show has a lot of potential.
That would be great. And those are both, like, Start Out and the NGLCC are both wonderful organizations. And of course, you should pay a visit when you come to San Francisco.
Yeah, definitely. And so for you, do you have a pretty strong relationship with those organizations? Are they helping you out, kind of grow your business?
I just came from the Start Out event. I guess it was 3 or 4 weeks ago. They had a big event, a block from our office. And I know quite a few people involved with the organization. It's a great organization. And I know some folks at the NGLCC as well. And they've offered, I haven't even taken advantage of everything that each of the organizations has offered, but knowing that they're a resource, knowing that I have friends involved in both of them and colleagues, it has been a big help. And so those are all great things.
So I have one question for you. Well, in addition to these last two questions, but a follow-up question on that. Are you certified as a business with the NGLCC at this point?
Bright Funds isn't yet, at least to my knowledge. But again, that's something that we would consider as we continue to grow and move into 2018.
Yeah. I was just asking because there's a lot of people who reach out to me to ask, what are the benefits of getting certified through the NGLCC? I don't quite see that as being a fit. And, just based on how you described your own business, it's definitely, I think you'll have a lot of access to a number of corporate partners who would definitely be interested in teaming up with what you're doing to connect their employees to your services. And that's the cool thing about the NGLCC is they have such a reach there. So obviously I'm a fan, but
that's awesome. I appreciate the recommendation, and I'll probably take you up on it.
Yeah. So we can talk offline about that if you have other questions. But okay, so 2 more for you. So can you share one piece of advice to inspire the next generation of outbosses to take that first entrepreneurial leap?
Nike style, just do it.
Yep.
Seriously, people overthink things. Like, if you feel like you're an entrepreneur and you're willing to have some grit, go for it.
Yep. Take action and really embrace the title of being an entrepreneur. I think that's super smart. Okay, last question for you, Ty. Can you tell us where we can find out more information about who you are and what Bright Funds does?
Sure thing. Follow me on Twitter at Ty Walrod, TYWALROD, or follow Bright Funds. And also check us out at brightfunds.org.
Awesome. All right. So thank you, Ty, so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it. And for all of the outbosses that are tuning in right now, thank you so much. It's always a privilege to connect with you and so many inspiring outbosses. So for details from today's conversation, I encourage you to visit the website, www.outentrepreneur.com. You can also find us on Apple, Stitcher, SoundCloud, all of the podcasting mediums. But please consider leaving a rating and review in iTunes. That's how the show really can get out there and get known. I'd love your honest feedback. I'd love to hear what you like about the show, what you'd like to hear more of. And thank you for being your authentic selves 100% of the time.